What's up, everybody? Welcome to the State of Wild, episode 57, a regular YouTube video web series podcast thingy. My name is Meowth, and as usual, I'm joined by Raffle and Corbett. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing all right. First week of the expansion. Hit a surprise early legend. Not really intending to, but I just was trying out good decks early on.
I am ready for the closing of the Olympics. I'm ready for that. Like I've been doing a lot of the sport watching, and with the launch of Stormwind, it's been a lot going on right now. The expansion launch has brought a lot of very unexpected things that I don't think any of us necessarily saw coming. So yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, huge shakeups in the WoW format, super impactful expansion. But before we get into all that, we have to take care of our usual business, So first things first, if you guys like the content, whether you guys are watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast from, make sure you guys hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It's a small thing, but it does support us a ton.
You can also support us by becoming a patron over at patreon.com/stateofwild.
And of course, when you become a patron, you get a whole bunch of perks in the patron Discord. So come join the podcast Discord. Even if you're not a patron, it's a great place to talk about the game and get to know some people in the State of the Wild community. Also, any patrons, an email is going out talking about how you can receive a whole bunch of your benefits. So make sure you check that email soon.
All right, housekeeping stuff out of the way. Let's just dive on into it. What are y'all's first impressions about the metagame? Huge shakeups. We thought there were going to be some impactful cards, right? And we figured there's some powerful stuff, but I don't think any of us kind of realized to what extent there was going to be a shakeup in the format. So what are y'all's first impressions been?
I think we're kind of anticipating a strong expansion. Like the power level seemed above the usual or like baseline for the power level of an expansion. I mean, that's been steadily increasing recently, it seems. So even with Forged in the Barrens, but I think I'm surprised at how much it's like. I think what it comes down to is I underrated a lot of cards and a lot of effects. In particular, some of the quest lines. I was like, those are going to be way too slow developing in Wild, but I think the intermediate steps were hard to evaluate. And if you have something like Awaken the Maker's quest, you play that and then you wait until you play 7 Death Rattle minions. The quest lines feel a little bit more active because you're actually getting relevant rewards as you work your way through the quest line.
Yeah, the expansion every single time, right? Like I remember this happened last time. We talked about don't underestimate the expansions in Wild. And even though I have that mindset, I still completely underestimated the expansion in Wild. Like, it's been so much more. This really feels to me like this expansion is a huge step forward in Wild. It feels like a Scholomance-esque type jump to me in terms of like the speed of the format and what it feels like, where it's kind of like this is more than a usual expansion, right? The meta is incredibly fast, incredibly combo heavy, very aggressive, and like you said, the quest lines are all making a huge impact, which is just crazy.
Yeah, I wasn't even trying to underestimate it. Like, I was high on this expansion, and it even blew me out of the waters. And I think, like we mentioned, the quest lines were the big thing. I didn't realize how fast they would be able to be completed. Like, even the Hunter one, I was like, yeah, we can complete this and kill people on, like, turn 7, turn 8. And Hunter's out here consistently killing people on turn 6. And that's too slow for some of the other quests in the format, right? Which is crazy. And even like Ignite Mage getting more toys. A lot of the combo decks are very, very happy. If you are a combo player, there's a lot of people that don't like combos, both in Standard and Wild, that are not super happy right now about the state of the format. But I mean, we gotta talk about the big deck, right? The big thing. We gotta talk about Questline Warlock. So for those of you guys that don't know, this is basically co-opting that Dark Lair engine, right? With Dark Lair tour guides, Cobalt Librarians, Raised Dead, Flesh Giants. Now we're mixing in Crystallizers as well. And it powers up that quest. It is very consistently completed on turn 4, right? Yeah. And then you play Tamsin on 5, and you kill people on turn 6, right? If you're not killing people with the Flesh Giants that you have played on turn 3, turn 4. and this is kind of taken over as the very popular version of the deck. There's a couple of theories that we can maybe hop into as to why that might be, but we were just comparing numbers earlier today, right before we went live, about how many Warlocks that we have seen this expansion. I was the lucky one. I was only queuing into 28% Warlocks this expansion. I think Raffle, you were at 32 or 33%.
Yeah, I think I was at 33.33 repeating, of course.
Yeah.
Repeating, of course. Yeah.
And then Corbett, you're the highest ranked player here out of the three of us. How many Warlocks were you queuing into?
Well, I wasn't able to look at the entire expansion, but I did count up in my last 100 games. I saw 57 Warlocks in my last 100 games. So that's a few.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
They're pretty much all. There's a couple cute locks as well, but they're all Dark Lair. They're all like either quest or non-quest. So yeah, that's a number.
Yeah, let's talk about this deck. I had what I thought were hot takes about this deck and why it was super popular, and then a lot of people were agreeing with me and echoing that sentiment. So maybe it's not even that hot of a take. But, I'll go ahead and say this. I don't know if the power level of this deck is higher than Dark Lair. Okay? We can get into that discussion afterwards. But I think everybody can agree that this deck is a lot easier to pilot than traditional Dark Lair Warlock. And as a result, we've talked previously on the podcast about how while Dark Lair is an extremely strong deck, right, it's usually limited to high legend ranks, right? It doesn't trickle down. And so the devs haven't really seen a need to step in, right? Because it doesn't impact a huge percentage of the population. But now with this quest, making this Dark Lair package and engine accessible to a larger number of players, now it's trickling down. And everybody, right, that's in Diamond and in Legend is seeing Dark Lair Warlock, and they're seeing the impact that this deck is having. And I think that's kind of where we're getting at. A lot of people are playing and experiencing Dark Lair Warlock for the first time. And so it feels like that's maybe where that huge percentage is coming from. I don't know if you guys disagree with that.
As someone who is notoriously terrible at playing Dark Lair, I will say that, yes, this version is much easier. It's much more linear. You don't have to think as much about how to pace out your threats, when to, time the Loatheb. It's just kind of, you have a clear objective in mind. Complete the quest, get to Tamsin, deal damage, end the game, kill the opponent. I think I'm not yet convinced that either one is better. I think it's a similar conversation to what we had when with Flamewaker Mozaki builds, that there's so much overlap between the two decks that I don't really know that it matters that much which one is better. They're very nearly the same. They have very similar matchup spreads with a few niche exceptions. So I don't think the distinction between them matters all that much. It's mostly just the win condition difference. And in the same way that at High Legend, the Flamewaker Mage was widely considered the better version of the deck, and the stronger of the two, players lower on the ladder didn't necessarily see that because it was quite difficult to pilot by comparison to the Mozaki version, which is very linear. Get to the Mozaki, win the game. So I think there's some similarities there. I'm not sure how much it matters which one is the better version when they're both quite successful, and they both rely on a very strong card in Dark Lair, which enables a lot of really silly things. I think when I was trying the deck myself, my first 3 to 4 games, I either didn't play the Tamsin or played the Tamsin and then didn't deal any damage with her because I just had lethal on board the next turn. So it's I don't know that again, very much like the APM mages, I think that they're so well blended together. I don't know that the differentiation as an archetype really needs to be made. It doesn't it's Dark Lair is what enables these decks to be so quick.
Yeah, and in a similar way that you could just kind of refer to them as Flow Mage. They pan out very similar. This is just Dark Lair Warlocks. Whether it's the quest or the not, they tend to be very similar. That said, I would agree, I think, with Ruffle that they are at a very similar power level. They're both insane. Like they're both that similar power level is they're both amazing. The win rate stuff on both these decks has been bonkers out the jump, despite having such a high play rate as well, and sort of being the immediate focus of the meta and the player base. The fact that the win rates are all just bonkers, it's pretty crazy. So I think there's still even like a little bit of room of refinement going on very clearly in the Seed Warlock, where it's a new archetype. It's still got a very similar shell, but we're still like learning. Something that I think is going to become popular, and this is just sort of me throwing it out there, that I haven't seen very much. I think Happy Ghoul is going to become a core piece in the deck. I played a lot of Happy Ghoul in the deck, and it's very, very easy to get that out. Just for obviously 0 mana when you have that quest completion, when you have things like touch and other healing tools. So yeah, I think the deck is still going through a process of refinement. Players still figuring it out. And yeah, it's kind of nuts. Like the initial impression that I had, like the first day of the expansion, a lot of people came to the stream and they were just asking me about it, and I was like, I think it's worse than Darkglare. I'm just not impressed. Like a lot of these games, they feel like the quest doesn't matter. And then the day after, I began to sort of, the cogs turned. I flipped my view. This deck's nuts. It's really great. It's not just like a fad Warlock thing that happens every other expansion.
I had a very similar realization. I think that there are two sort of standout takes that I had from Darkglare Warlock. First, I vastly underestimated the quest line like as a win condition. Like you don't need to get that much damage off of it, especially if you get an early giant down. The second thing is that I think it kind of pushes down the ceiling in terms of game length a little bit, because unlike regular Darkglare Warlock, you don't have the ability to clear it, so you just don't win as a control deck. Whereas Odd Warrior in the past, even if they got an early Giants board with a Loatheb to lock it out, you still had like Skipper Barov. You can't do that against Questline Warlock, so you cannot win that matchup. I was playing Odd Pirate Warrior a bit, and I was just like, as soon as I saw the quest come down, I was just out. Like there's no chance for me to win the game. And so that, I think, is maybe I can see why people consider it a bigger problem than they did Darkglare prior to the expansion, both because of the visibility at lower ranks and the fact that it does kind of smush down that top end for game length as a result of its inevitability, basically.
Yeah, I was gonna make the same point. Like personally, in my experience, I haven't played the Questline Warlock. I do the whole play things that are not being played by everything else, but yeah. I have lost more to Darkglare than I have the quest versions of the deck, just because I feel like Darkglare has more ways to interact with you and try to cheese out early games against aggressive decks than I do the quest Warlocks. But like Raffle said, it's kind of a very similar situation that we saw with Stealer of Souls, where you were kind of being forced to play aggro, right? Because late game win cons don't exist when the quest Warlocks do, right? Like you mentioned. Where, like, at least with Darkglare, I could play stuff like Odd Warrior, I could play Libra Paladin, I could play these decks that had the potential to stop these waves of giants and actually be able to win a game as a slow deck, even if I was unfavored. You can't do that with Quest Warlock. So I do think that Quest Warlock is a problem, even if I don't think that it is at the same power level as Darkglare Warlock. Like, I think it will be addressed, whether if it's as a result of standard nerfs that just happened to hit this deck, or if it's a wild specific hit, just because I feel like it's the very same situation that we saw, a month and a half ago with Stealer of Souls, right? Where it's kind of just pushing this meta to be combo or aggro, and it's pushing out a huge percentage of the decks in the format.
Yeah, I'm sure that the comparison with Stealer makes a lot of sense. I think there are some important distinctions. In terms of what you're saying, in terms of like pushing out control, totally valid. Obviously, that's what's happening. This is probably the most control is dead type feeling that I've had in an expansion. Like, Wild is always a very combo and aggressive slanted format, but right now, like, Reno Priest has around a 41% win rate. Odd Warrior has like a 41% win rate. Reno Warlock is like low 40s as well. Because what Ruffle was saying, a matchup like normal Darkglare for Reno Priest, that's manageable, right? You can sometimes clear the Giants. You can sometimes, bide enough time, just deleting them off the board, Wave of Apathy. You can maybe Elucia, their end-of-game combo. In this, they play the Tamsin, and it's like, well, board doesn't matter as much because they just have all this over the top damage, and so it's kind of made that so much more extreme. In terms of the Stealer comparison, so it's definitely similar in terms of the pushing out control and sort of hard capping the format. I think Stealer had a whole bunch of other issues that, just to play devil's advocate, I can see them kind of riding this out in Wild. I wouldn't, if you told me like 2 weeks from now that Wild didn't see any nerfs, I wouldn't be that surprised, because like Stealer had other issues which were, the animation time related, like there were real issues with that. There were the people exploiting, people cheating to get around the animation timer. It was also a deck where I think the thing that Blizzard tends to hate most is when it's like the game's going and then something happens and the game's immediately over. So like in that case, it was play Stealer, Stealer plot, and then like either the Mechthon combo or just vomit everything. Whereas they tend to be more fine when things is more incremental and you can see it coming. And so that's what literally a quest line is, right? It's something that's incremental and sort of builds up. And so I can definitely see a world where they kind of let this ride out as long as the Warlock population drops a little bit in the next couple of weeks. But that's only because I know they have such a high bar for like what they touch in Wild.
Yeah, what did Stealer of Souls end up stabilizing at before they announced the ban?
Yeah, so Stealer came out the jump at about 40%, and it was going down by about 3 to 4 every day until about day 5, when it settled out at around 23% of the format at like Diamond and up, around that 20% mark maybe.
Yeah, so I think right now we're still on that decline maybe for Questline Warlocks, would you say?
Are we declining? Are we declining? I feel like it's increased.
Yeah, maybe. Honestly, personally, I have seen a little bit less because I've seen a lot of people pivot to these hard counters, right? These hard counter aggro decks.
Yeah.
As people have completely abandoned any sort of other experimentation. So, like, in my small pocket, yes, but I guess maybe overall, I don't know what the population.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard as just one person, right, to get like a grasp of the entire picture.
Yeah, and I think there aren't even necessarily new counters to this deck that are not necessarily being played right now. So I think once people sort of reshift away from experimentation to a lot of the previous best decks in the format are going to still counter this deck because they were well equipped to race down Darkglare Warlock. It's really those decks at the top end that are getting punished. And this is shortly after we just saw that rise in Galakrond and Reno Shaman actually becoming a relevant archetype in the format, and things had shifted, towards the other end of, it was one of the slower formats we had seen in a while. So it's kind of like a little bit of whiplash here where we finally got that slower format, and then, a new win condition came in to set a clock on pretty much all games in Wild. Unfortunately, in terms of the standard nerf, I don't know that the Quest Warlock seems to be a good deck. It's tanking in terms of its viability in the format after day 1 when people were, kind of upset about it over there as well. So if they do make a change, it will need to be because of a Wild specific issue, which I would say, 33 to 40% Warlock is probably a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I think like obviously if it maintains something like this, they will make a change. I'm just throwing it out there because I feel like everyone's assuming that they're gonna do a nerf in a week, and I'm like, guys, it's Wild. Like they might, they might not do it just because you want it to.
Right, and if it is a Wild specific nerf, I doubt it will be a week because they'll have to think about the implications for the standard format as well, whether they want to, ban a card again, or if it if the quest isn't super powerful in standard, why are they going to nerf it while it's in standard? So I think that we don't know, but I think that the deck is beatable. It's just unfortunately not a lot of people are playing those decks that beat it right now. They're all just playing Quest Warlock, it seems. So they haven't been bullied out. I've been noticing a fairly steady incline at lower legend ranks. It seems that people are wanting to try out the new hotness and queuing it up.
Yeah, that's always the struggle, right? How much of that is people just trying out the new thing compared to playing stuff like Secret Mage and Odd Paladin and the good old busted decks, and how much are people like playing the new busted deck, right? That's the question.
Well, I mean, on the topic of Secret Mage, like you brought that up. We were talking about win rates tanking. Secret Mage win rate has tanked. Secret Mage, I don't believe it beats the Warlock deck. It actually goes like 40%. The current Secret Mage list against Warlock since the expansion launch is at like 40% against Warlock. That matchup is not good for the Secret Mage. And whereas previously it was decent into Dark Lair, the current version, it just doesn't seem to matter as much because the secrets don't really interact. You can also deny rigged fair game a lot easier with the quest line, and you know you just tend to have a little bit more like healing and things like that. So being burnt out over the top is also very difficult. So like Secret Mage is a deck that has struggled a lot early on. It also loses very badly to Questline Hunter, which is again one of the more popular decks since the expansion launched, which you know we should definitely get into as well. But there has been like a dramatic shift here, and you're seeing stuff like Tax Paladin become a lot better. And so it's kind of weird. We're kind of in this an expansion launches, combo broken decks come out, tax decks get tax and burn decks become strong, Secret Mage tanks, and then we'll see where we are in a week after some nerfs. You know, maybe Secret Mage can come back.
I do want to pose this last question before we move on from Quest Warlock, because we, believe it or not, there are other decks that have been, you know, arisen with the new expansion.
Yeah.
I know we're going to be asked this, so I want to go ahead and get y'all's opinion about this. If they don't nerf anything because of standard Questline Warlock, but they do decide that they want to address something in Wild Quest Warlock, right? Are we looking at another ban situation where they just, like, ban the Demon Seed? Or are we looking at something, like, more long-term where we see a shift to a nerf to Cobalt Librarian, right? This is like the only wild specific card that's like super popular in that archetype. Or do we even see something like super abnormal where we just see a ban to Dark Lair itself or a ban to Raise Dead on this card? What do you guys think is the most likely, you know, scenario?
I think a ban is certainly possible for something like Dark Lair. I don't know how you nerf the card without effectively deleting it. Like maybe move it to a 3-mana 3/4 that refreshes only one. So it's kind of like somewhere in between the two versions of the card, and that'll slow the deck down enough to not be as oppressive as it is now, while still being like a playable card. Because you know it's the spider tank, if nothing else. That would be my preferred change of something to Dark Lair. I think Dark Lair is what enables a lot of the powerful turns both of these decks have. Like the reason the quest line gets completed so quickly, frequently at least, is in part due to mana cheating with the Dark Lair, so you can, you know, get through those stages and deal that much damage to yourself. So I would like to see Dark Lair changed, but if they do make a change to the Demon Seed just to reduce some of that inevitability aspect that we talked about in terms of pushing down the game length, I think that would be, I would appreciate that. But I think that the real problem in terms of what makes the decks go, and therefore what makes them popular, because they're strong, is Dark Lair.
Yeah, so I would be with you there on Dark Lair. It's just the problem is it's standard card still. Like, it's still bopping around there. So, you know, we're probably not going to see a change to it. We could see a ban. I think, like, a ban to Dark Lair would be something that is sort of preferable if they don't want to go that route. I've always been in favor of nerfing Librarian to a Death Rattle. I think that actually solves some of the problems, because it means that when you raise Dead it, you don't immediately get the draw, and you don't immediately get the self-damage. So it slows down a lot of the Dark Lair stuff while still keeping the quote-unquote soul, I suppose, of the card, maybe, for other Warlock decks. But maybe they don't want to go for that change either. So I feel like the most obvious one is sort of like banning out Dark Lair, or maybe they're comfortable where Dark Lair was before the expansion, because it wasn't that popular at all, right? And so maybe that's totally fine, in which case they might just ban out the quest. So I don't know exactly what they want to do. I think they have options if they do want to do anything. It's just interesting to see, you know, what direction they go, if any. You know,
if any. I mean, we can go ahead and jump to this. Ixar's Q&A yesterday. There was a mention that they will be meeting next Tuesday to talk about balance and discuss the meta. So potentially nerfs come in like the week after, right? If there are any nerfs come in.
Yeah, this is pretty like planned, because they had very similar thing in terms of their release schedule, like last expansion. This is like always planned. Like last time the expansion came out on the 30th, the following week they planned for nerfs, and the nerfs are announced on the 10th of April. So it's about, like 10 to 12 days kind of thing. So
Yeah, and that's something that's come up in recent Q&As with XR as well, that they do have sort of a scheduled kind of, at least conversation about these times of things or intended phase of the release cycle.
yeah, the expectation that they're going to be doing something.
Yeah. Well, time will tell. I will say I think I picked a very good weekend to go on break. Take a little bit of a mental reset from all these Quest Warlocks, so might be nice. All right, let's talk about the next deck. Probably the second most popular deck that's popped up from United and Stormwind. And what a world we're living in, where all the priests are playing aggro decks and all the hunter decks are playing control Raza Hunter. Like, what is going on here? We're talking about Defend the Dwarven District. I can never say that word. But Questline Hunter, right? Pew Pew Hunter, whether you're playing the odd variant or the non-odd variant of the deck. Man, I know we were all excited about this deck, and we talked about how we think that this is just going to be worse than Raza Priest, so it's okay that we enjoy it because it's new and it's flashy, but it's not as good as Raza Priest. I think we're right about a lot of that, except for the fact that it's much, much better than Raza Priest. The deck looks actually really, really good. Let's talk about, first of all, y'all's impressions about this deck. Like, I know it's a fun deck, but what do y'all think about the power level itself?
I think I underestimated it, but I don't know that it'll be anything more than something of a fringe meta choice once the dust settles a little bit after things, the hype draws down. I can't imagine it doing well against some of the board-based aggro decks that were pretty prevalent before the expansion, just because applying pressure is how you can deal with a deck like this. I think it was better as a deck than I thought. Both versions, the odd and the regular Buzzard draw engine, and I did fairly well with it. I was pretty surprised. I especially was really skeptical of the odd version, just because it didn't feel like it was going to have enough gas. And then I started seeing people on their combo turns playing flares and trackings and even lock-and loads into Voracious Readers. And then I started seeing how many times their hero power was hitting me, and I realized that, well, with the +1 damage, you really don't need that many refreshes. It's not Reno Priest, because you're not chipping through 30 damage 2 at a time. The extra point of damage every turn makes a pretty big difference. I'm not convinced it's better just yet, but it's certainly better than the odd and even version or the full curve version. But I think it's better than I pegged it at when I was first queuing up, and I think I was maybe partaking in a little bit of copium just simply because I wanted to play the Buzzard Beast combo, and so I needed that version to be better, just because for me it was more fun to play, just churning through your deck. Felt a little bit more like a Raza Priest. Plus, the Dragonbane high rolls were kind of fun.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Where I really want the Buzzard version to be better, but it kind of looks like the odd version is better, and it's not just better; it's really good right now, which is just so baffling to me. Again, we were talking about the underestimating of a whole bunch of these cards. This is definitely like a dark type that I completely underestimated. I think that outside Warlock, before we go into every deck, I think outside Warlock, the expansion has actually been very, very cool in terms of highly diverse and weird, very weird as well. And so it's been very fun outside sort of this one archetype. And Hunter is one of the biggest surprises, right? So I wanted the Buzzard version to be good. The odd version does seem better right now. The deck can match up fairly well into aggressive matchups. A lot of those early spells, they can target minions, so like the wound prey and things like that. And even the hero power being able to target minions make it pretty effective for board control. And it's like what makes that mage matchup so brutal, where they can clear off the board early and then continue to deny rigged fair game. And it's a big part of why Secret Mage is tough spot. The flares are also great against ice block, against combo mages and stuff like that. And so it's very well rounded, actually, surprisingly, right? where it can control board, it can burn phase, it's got a clear clock, and it's just been really effective so far. So I really am going to keep trying to work on the Buzzard version and see if there's a build I like for that, because God, I want that version to be better. I want it to be good. The odd one doesn't interest me as much, but there's no denying it's been really strong so far.
Yeah, I'm on the same boat as both of you guys about Buzzard. I will say, like Raffle said, if board-based decks come back, right now they don't exist, right? If they do come back, I can see the Buzzard build being much better than the odd version of the build, because the odd version of the build doesn't have like explosive trap, it doesn't have the pack runners, it doesn't have any of those tools, and so it feels very much like Burn Odd Hunter, right? That just has the quest that it can utilize in the mid game to help control board, so it doesn't like completely get run over by like a 2/2, right? But if
I mean,
like,
I think,
paladins and stuff,
I think it's good. I think it's good into like aggro decks that are more tall, right?
Yeah.
Like a secret mage, right? But against like an odd pally, that's what you're saying, right? Like
Yeah.
against like the wide aggro, that's where it can struggle a little bit.
I mean, even against stuff like, I don't know, like aggro priest, right? I feel like I haven't had that much trouble. I can't believe I'm saying these words. Aggro priest against Raza Hunter. Even in that matchup, right? If you play like a Cannon Coin Pirates, the odd hunter has a little bit of trouble dealing with that, right? Unless they have the nuts rapid fire. And so in those situations, I can totally see that like even version of the build coming back. And my big hesitation was like, okay, yes, the odd version of the deck does a lot more damage, but the consistency is a lot lower of the deck. And maybe I was wrong on that because it feels fairly consistent, right? That they are killing me on turn 6 or turn 7, but it'll be interesting to see, like you guys mentioned, how the deck kind of pans out in the long run once the meta starts to settle, maybe. But if it remains 35-40% Quest Warlocks, I think odd version of the deck is going to be much better because it has a lot more burst, right? You don't need consistency when the games are ending on turn 5, right? The only thing that's consistent is you have that quest in that opening hand and you're completing it as fast as possible. So, but yeah, I mean, I think the big takeaway here, I thought Raza Hunter was going to be a meme. And it turns out that it's a very viable, valid deck choice for ladder, which is crazy. Speaking of another deck, I am very happy that I bought into the hype of Shadow Priest, because about damn time the deck is actually legit. All right, it for real this time. It's only taken like 3 years of aggressive priest cards, but we're here. We've reached the point. Dude, aggro Shadow Priest, if you're queuing into a bunch of warlocks, this deck is actually the best deck in the format. It is so fast, and it is so fast.
I had a turn 3 lethal today. That was amazing.
Yeah, I don't think I've gotten a turn 3 yet, but I've
I was gonna say, I had a lot of turn 4s. I had a turn 3 effectively lethal because I coined a Lucia with an empty hand, so it's like effective GG. I played this deck just today. What is it, the Void Touched Attendant?
Yes.
The 1 mana 1/3 that both heroes take extra damage from all sources. That card is outrageous. Especially with the pirate package, which again in Priest sounds absurd. I've done it before. It was absurd at the time. Now it's actually like a real thing. Yeah. Because of the Parachute Brigand plus Patches pulls, you can just get this disgusting board that's going like it feels like an aggro druid opener. But with the nut draw and somehow like more cards in hand than they're allowed to have. So it's just like, I think it's the real deal. I think it's probably fitting into a similar role that, the Gibberling aggro druid has in the past, where if you need to go fast, which is currently what's necessary, this is the deck. And it does seem to be legit.
Yeah, this deck is super cool. This feels really satisfying to play, is the big thing that I found. Something about it, just the pirates feel a little bit weird, but whatever. We'll just like gloss over that. The attendant, like Revel said, is insane. Like that card is so absurdly good. And like I was trying a version without the weapon, like without the needle, without the visions and thrive, but I ultimately came to the conclusion that I kind of liked those cards, like after playing a bit without them. Just because the thinking was there's not like a ton of board-based stuff right now, and maybe there's not really need, but the weapon just seems really strong, to be honest. Like, Rafa, you played a ton of the deck today. What did you like in particular, like about the deck?
I will say that I slept on the weapon. I think Meowth was making a case for it, and I was refusing to listen. It's just 3 charges of 3 damage. It basically gives your Mind Blast +1 spell damage, which is sort of what Void Touch Attendant does as well. But it like makes your Raised Deads and those Thrives actually relevant cards to play because every point of damage matters. Very much like old school Face Hunter, you're really looking to just absolutely maximize the damage that you deal each turn. And I think that those 3 extra points of damage that are fairly easy to pull off is necessary in the deck. There are really cute things that you can do with Raised Dead as well, especially
the pirates, right?
Exactly, with the pirates, the Parachute Brigand, the Shadow Bombers, even the Voyage Touch. Like, I think Raised Dead was like consistently the pull that I would take off of the Visions and the whatever the other shadow card Thrive, yeah. Off of the Visions and Thrive simply because it was 0 mana, deal 1 damage with the Shadow Needle Cloth. Like that card really carried a lot of matchups. It didn't do a whole lot of board clearing, but anytime it did, it was incredibly relevant. Like there were times I think I was up against a questline shaman, and they summon the taunt minions, or up against a pirate warrior even, and they summon a 3/3 taunt. It's just like, well, I would have to spend damage getting through this. Now I just play 3 spells and continue going face, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, I also find the weapon is like super important in the other aggressive mirror, which is like Aggro Priest versus Aggro Priest, right? And clearing off the pirates with your own thing while dealing damage is like super relevant. Man, like the combination of Void Touch Attendant and
Pew Pew Pew,
the 2/3, whatever it's called.
I thought you meant the cannon shots.
But well, I mean that too. But I was just talking about like the addition of these like 6 new cards, right? Have just like they're nuts, right? They're so good. Like the 2/3 that draws you a card for playing a 1-drop, which you want to do anyways, right?
Yep.
Is
the Scepter,
Twilight Deceptor, yeah. And then like Otters, I think we're shouting out Otters a ton, but Otters gave me the idea for Fell Wings, which have become like super popular because they're super easy to activate. Right, I've had multiple games where I like play a Shadow Bomber on turn 1 and then coin out a Fell Wing, and so like it's like pulling patches out of your deck, except you pull out a 3/3. Right, you really are playing Aggro Druid. And then something I never thought I would ever see is Southsea deckhands having charge in Priest because of the weapon, which is like it's like it's so crazy. But like I've had multiple games where I'm charging a 2/1 right on turn 3, which is it's. I am happy that this deck exists. It makes me satisfied and happy to play this, and I'm hopeful that this is not another like aggro shaman situation where like aggro shaman looked really really good because it farmed Stealer Warlocks, and then when Stealer Warlocks went away, the deck died, and
this looks a lot better. This looks a lot better early on than those decks did. Like this looks legit.
I'm just hopeful that if they do touch those questline warlocks, that this remains the thing, because I am so happy that I'm playing Aggro Priest. It's awesome. All right, let's move on to a couple of the other decks. Let's talk about some Paladins, right? So we were talking and hyping up Hand Buff Paladin before the expansion release, right? Both the pure and the bubble versions of the deck. I've played a little bit of Bubble Paladin. I haven't touched much of the pure Hand Buff. Have you guys played against it a lot or played it yourselves?
I played quite a bit of Bubble Hand Buff with Jewel Kit and just like forcing the Divine Shield minions, and it was good. Like Jewel Kit, I think maybe a little bit slow rolling. I felt like I didn't, and it was maybe just the way that I built the deck, but I didn't feel like I had enough refill like I did when Hand Buff Paladin was, overwhelmingly the best deck in the format. So it may have just been that I was, falling short on my draws because I wasn't running Lions in particular, were something that probably could have been included to help with that. But yeah, the deck's good. I think a heavy charge version probably does quite well into Questline Warlock. I wasn't having difficulty with it, even just, shoving fat minions into play, a few of which had lifesteal. Like, that was able to help me stabilize until I found the board that I could stick with Convictions, or just throwing some Horse Riders at the opponent's face. So I think it has potential to be a deck that can be built in a way, at least, that beats the Questline Warlock or Dark Lair Warlock, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, the Pally is actually sort of underwhelmed me, like, especially from what I thought it was going to be heading into the expansion. Yeah, it has. It's been fine, I think, but I haven't seen a ton of it. Like, I tried the Call to Arms version that I had theory crafted, and I didn't really like it as much. I quickly came to the conclusion that I think I like the kind of normal, like the pure version more, from like the previous expansion. I think still trying dual kit in that deck is fine, where we could just play the older version, but just try and shove in as many Divine Shield cards as possible. But yeah, I don't know. I think Hand Buff Paladin isn't getting a ton of attention, and it's weirdly a deck that is in bad need of refinement. Like, it feels a little bit messy in terms of what people are trying. There's a lot of different options the players have. So I wouldn't be surprised like if things settle down, if the build's going to get figured out, that it becomes quite decent. But for now, I'm mostly just underwhelmed with the art type, which is really not what I was expecting. Because like, of course I expected Aggro Priest and Questline Odd Hunter to be like top dogs, and I'm correct on that. So it's really weird for me to have missed, I think, a little bit on this Hand Buff Paladin.
It's kind of crazy that Jewel Kit seems a little too fair right now. Like, I didn't think I would say that when we saw Jewel Kit and we're talking about it, but it feels too fair and too slow for the metagame right now, and that might be a result. I wonder if just like pure Hand Buff Paladin with just like Alliance Bannermans and Catacomb Guards is the only new cards is like, I wonder if trying to shove in Jewel Kit is even worth it. Which is I don't know if that's crazy to say, but we need to page our resident Hand Buff expert bodybuilder and get his opinion on how this deck is faring. But I haven't seen a ton of it. I think it wasn't a super popular archetype beforehand anyways, and now like the new deck that everybody's gravitating to is Quest Hunter and Quest Warlock. So I don't like you mentioned, I don't think anybody's playing this and refining it, save bodybuilder.
Well, one person.
I did reasonably well against both of those decks, and granted that was like, I think it was a day one pickup for me, but I think that, again, I think you shove just your usual buffs and a few chargers in. I don't think you need the Jewel Kit because you just cut a lot of the Divine Shield minions anyway, and include things that go face, and that when paired with Conviction, like the Questline Warlock doesn't have taunts. It doesn't have a whole lot of defense, so they get themselves low, and then congrats, you have your Tamsin, now you're dead. And so like I think that building it that way is probably a way to go. But there are also other Paladin decks that do quite well into Dark Glare and Questline Warlock both.
Yeah, all right. Great transition. Let's talk about those tax paladins that have been popping up. This combination of Weeb Lords and Far Watchpost. It's a pretty powerful, roadblock for a lot of these combo decks. What is it? Hashtag watch out. Hashtag post up.
Hashtag post up.
Yeah. I mean, this is a tried and true strategy of Forged in the Barrens. Even the nerf version of the deck still seems like it's like slowing down. Like as Raffle mentioned, the Quest Warlocks. Tax Paladin made waves, right, in Forged in the Barrens because it slowed down both Dark Glare and Secret Mage. Don't really need to slow down Secret Mage anymore because they don't exist, but it is still really, really strong at slowing down those Dark Glare decks. And I will say, you can transition that tax package into, they are neutral cards, can transition them into a whole host of other decks.
All right, slow down. Let's not sell job just yet on the other tax archetypes, Meowth. Come on, gotta do that later. But no, Tax Pally looks really good. Right now it looks really good. Turns out the deck that does decently well into Darkglare Warlock does well when Darkglare Warlock is quite literally almost a third of the meta. So this is our savior. Whenever things get a little bit too uninteractive, Tax Pally is just there to collect a little bit. Has it really gotten anything from the expansion? I try to remember if it actually picked up anything. I don't believe so, but I mean, who cares? It's fine. This is an example, I think, of the decks that Meowth flagged at the top of the show, where a lot of people are very focused on playing new stuff. Very understandable. Like, new stuff is cool. Love new stuff. But there are options that players have if they do want to go back to something a little bit, same old, same old. And Tax Pally, it did go away for some time, but I'm sure there will be, like, there's a player, I believe, that hit rank 1 on China, I think. And so that'll usually generate a little bit of hype, and we should start seeing it a little bit more, and then maybe it'll trickle down as players definitely explore and demand options for Warlock.
Yeah, when combo gets super popular, right? Hearthstone's a game that has very limited interaction, right? Like other card games and other formats, they have, like specifically Magic, they have counter spells. They have that instant speed interaction. We don't have access to that in Hearthstone. So the next best thing is playing stuff like Tax Paladin, because that's like the only way that you can really slow them down, right, and stop and disrupt their game plan. And I'm a big fan of this archetype. I know a lot of people have been playing Mindbreaker. That's kind of the big inclusion from that Chinese list that hit rank 1.
Oh,
because they're playing Mindbreaker because that stops the Raza Hunters, right? Believe it or not, stopping Raza Hunters is something important, which is I can't believe I'm saying these words, but yeah, you don't need the birds anymore, right? Because I think a lot of the Tax Paladins are running birds to stop Reno decks, and Reno decks don't exist anymore because of quest lines, so you're just kind of like slotting those out and putting in Mindbreakers for that meta choice. But yeah, if you're looking for a deck, right, if you're stuck at that bottleneck to legend, or you're just frustrated with questline warlocks and you want a deck that's going to farm them, you got Aggro Shadow Priest and you got Tax Paladin, like two very, very good decks against those. All right, the next deck that I want to talk about are all of the different variations on Pirate Warrior. So Pirate Warrior got some massive support this expansion with the Quest, Harbor Scamp, Cargo Guard, and the other 3-mana 3/3 that I'm forgetting the name of, but lots of support. And so I have seen a wide variety of Pirate Warrior archetypes on ladder, right? Which is kind of crazy. You got the pure Pirate Warrior list that are just running Harbor Scamp as the new card, and no quest. I've seen like pure Pirate Warriors running the quest, and then I've seen a bunch of Reno Quest Pirate Warrior and both Odd Pirate Quest Warrior. God, what has this expansion done to the WoW format, man? I would love to see y'all's opinions about these 4 decks, and specifically about that, like the pure Pirate Warrior, and whether you think that the quest belongs or not, because I know that this is something we had kind of dismissed prior to the expansion, but the quest is pretty damn powerful, and I don't know, maybe it does slot into quest, pure quest Pirate Warrior. So I'm interested in y'all's opinions about the good old traditional Pirate Warrior of 7 years.
Well, I'll preface this by saying that I was one of the dummies running Odd Pirate Quest Warrior day 1. I think it was a fun deck. I had Bran in it. I got 2 Juggernauts many times, and I was blasting left and right to just dual wielding pistols or cannons. Even it was incredible. That said, I think at present, I would be surprised if the quest version is performing better. And that's not because the quest isn't strong. I did underestimate the quest. Drawing Anchor on 3 is pretty good. I don't know if cards later are better than cards now, which is what not running the quest would allow for, especially with the increased speed of the metagame right now. So at present, I think you want to be cutting the quests just so that you can shove stuff at your Warlock opponent's face. I think it's possible still that as things settle and maybe if they ever do slow down, that the quest could come back in, or you just expect a mulligan at every game against Warlock. The problem then is that one of the few relevant slow Warlock archetypes is going to be Reno Lock, and you won't have the quest for that. So it's is it worth putting in your deck if you're just going to mulligan it away against the most common matchup? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it definitely hurts the Warlock matchup, not by a ton, but by a little bit. Like, tutoring Anchor and the cannon shells are still relevant, but, being a little bit less explosive and copying that mulligan cost is important in the matchup. But I think overall, despite the fact that it's probably a little bit weaker into Warlock, I've been very impressed with the quest in normal Pirate Warrior. I think it's better than just not including the quest. The builds, I actually got the chance to play a lot of Pirate Warrior yesterday for the first time. And what I came to, the conclusion I came to was that we basically just build around the Ankar draw, right? So we assumed every game we're going to get the Ankar, so that means Sword Eater, that's gone. We're just cutting that card out completely. We're pushing the curve super low. I've actually gone ahead and cut Rakara, because in theory, I know how good Rakara is, but if you're not vomiting on turn 1 and you're a little bit slower and you want to be playing Pirates every turn, I think that there's merit to not playing Rakara in the deck. I'm pushing for as many 1-drops as possible. So we're running Bloodsail Deckhand, which is great, by the way. If you get that early and then your anchor costs 2, guaranteed to draw, that card's really, really good. But I'm also looking at Bloodsail Corsair. I've been running double of those, the 1-mana 1/2 pirate. Just because ripping through your quests as fast as possible is really, I think, what you want to be doing. And because you have that guaranteed anchor draw, you tend to just not run out of cards, even if the curve is super low. So I very often have completed the quest on like turn 5, just to give like an idea of just how fast it's happening. And I've been very impressed with Pirate Warrior. Again, I think it does lose to the Warlock matchup, but apart from that one matchup in particular, the deck seems really, really solid to me. I think if the format ever gets more normal, like just get some semblance of normality back, Pirate Warrior will definitely shine. So yeah, I think I completely underestimated the quest. I wrote it off as not being good enough for Pirate Warrior and like making 0 sense. And I think I was just wrong. Like I think it's really good. And the anchor draw in particular, like guaranteed 1-mana draw and anchor and being able to build around that seems super, super valuable. So yeah, it's been a pleasant surprise, I think.
Yeah,
it's been the deck that I just haven't wanted to delete, like at any point. Even though I've been losing to Warlocks, I felt really good about it.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, and I have been beaten by like pure quest Pirate Warriors, but there also have been many, many games where like I'm playing jank, right? Like I'm not playing Questline Warlock, and I'm not only playing like hyper aggro. There are games where like they play quest and then they play like 1-drop into Brigand into patches, and I'm just like, well, if you'd done this on turn 1, I'm losing the game because I can't recover from that. But because you did it a turn later, I already have a minion on board that I can use to trade and sustain. And then like the Juggernaut's really, really good, but if you're playing something like Rena Lock or Rena Priest, like the Juggernaut's not that much pressure, is it? That like you're okay giving up? Like it's hard to tell because those decks don't exist right now, right? Is the big thing. Yeah. But I'm still in this like limbo of like, you're giving up Pirate into Brigand into patches on turn 1. Like that can't feel good to do.
I mean, you don't have to play it on turn 1 if you don't want to. Like the quest, you can just give up that like 1 pirate tick to play it on turn 2 or turn 3. There are also been matchups I've played where I've just tossed the quest. Like that only tends to probably work at higher ranks, or if you know for sure what your opponent's playing. Like if there's a class right now, like Priest, which is only aggro because it's never played a slow archetype in its life. But there's been times where I played against like an aggro druid, right? Where I just tossed it because that was like, well, I want a first mate on 1. I don't want anything else.
It always just raises that question: is it worth running at that point if you're tossed? It depends on how often you're tossing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, I think it's been good. Like I would give it a shot.
Yeah. I mean, I will also say, pure Pirate Warrior aside, okay, I do think whether you're running quest or not, that deck is going to be good, right?
Yeah.
Both. I don't want to harp on this just because I talked about it last week, but like Reno Pirate Warrior did really well. This is before everybody started playing Quest Warlock, okay? But also, I went 9-3 with one of those being a huge throw with the Odd Pirate Warrior, right? Odd Pirate Warrior is farming all the aggro priests, like all the decks that people are playing to counter Quest Warlock. The Odd Pirate build farms. It is so good in those matchups.
I played against that day 1 when I was playing Reno Priest, and I was blown away. I was like, holy crap. Because I was playing Reno Priest, and they ended the game at like 50 health, and I was just completely out-pressured with just the quest. And I was like, holy crap, this is like, they actually gave Odd Warrior win condition. What happened? Little did I know, like, Reno Priest wasn't relevant at all. Like, it doesn't actually matter in the slightest. And the Warlocks were, the important thing. But I think, again, it's sort of the same thing, where I think if the meta gets a little bit more normal, maybe the odd warrior with pirates can come back, because it seemed promising in that first hour before things got crazy.
And there's a couple other decks that I want to kind of just touch on really, really quickly as we wrap up here that are seeing a little bit of play, right? These are the other 3 decks that I want to talk about. We've got Ignite Mage, all right? This is the next iteration of the Sorcerer's Apprentice flow archetype within the deck. Chandler, pretty damn good at cycling through your deck. I know we kind of glossed over that, but important thing about this card, the animation time for drawing a card is like half the time of a Luna card draw, so super relevant if you're relying on APM. The Quest Druids, this is a build that Martian has been popularizing like today, right, as we record the episode. I do not know how much of this is him just smacking Warlock players in the face, and whether this is real or not. But there are so many cards that I like had to look up what they did, right? Like Savagery and Savage Striker and Nash. Like I didn't know what any of these cards did, but taking advantage of them to their full extent. And last but not least, Evenlock and Reno Evenlock. I want to touch on these because they are unplayable, even though they got a billion cards. Because unfortunately, even if you're playing 8/8s on turn 3 and turn 4, if you're dying on turn 5 to Quest Warlocks and the decks that are trying to counter Quest Warlocks, it turns out your deck's probably not going to be pretty damn good. Do you guys have any comments about either of these 3 decks? I know, Raffle, you played a lot of that Questline Druid. How'd you feel about it?
Much better than I expected. It seemed, even as I was playing games and winning games, quite a few in a row, in fact, against Warlocks as well as other aggressive decks, every turn, it's like, yeah, but my play's so fair. Like, it's just, yeah, okay, so I'm sending 4 upstairs with a bite, and it adds 5 armor because I completed the first quest line, but like, what does it matter? And then the number of times where I'd stabilize at 5 health, 20 armor, and just be smacking my opponent in the head for 20, and it's like, oh, that's not fair. Like the deck, it's kind of like Kingsbane when it had Leeching Poison, where you slowly ramp up your attacks and just send it upstairs. You don't care too much about the opponent's board. You get wrecked by taunt minions. A Void Lord came down out of nowhere, and I was just like, oh, I have the potential for 3 Guffs in hand, and I lose this game. so it's like it's weird things like that. But like in the aggro matchup, it just, I don't know. There's something satisfying about just seeing big numbers on your hero and then just sending it upstairs every turn, because that's really what you're doing. You just spike a Guff, sometimes with a Bran, and that kills the opponent. So yeah, I was shocked. I think I was running a slightly outdated version of Martian's build. I like the newer inclusions to make it a bit more aggressive, in line with just shoving stuff upstairs. But Savagery and Savage Combatant, actually pretty good cards when you have 10 plus attack on your hero. There are a lot of times where I could clear 2 giants without taking any damage and just keep going upstairs, and like the big numbers going face is really good against Questline Warlock. So
Questline has been surprisingly effective right now. It's fun. There are a few different builds that people can try. It's basically, there are kind of like 3 ideas, right? You can play like the normal Martian build, right? With, just like Savage, what's it called? Like Savage Striker, Questing Explorer, just like those types of minions. You can run like an Oaken Summons version with basically just the Panthers. Just like skip a couple of the early game minions, and because Oaken Summons, good card. Or you can run Baku, and you can play an odd version, which was what I was doing yesterday. And I also managed to get in the top 10 or something with the odd Quest Druid, of course, which was surprisingly effective as well. It looks like it has a pretty decent win rate. So deck's weird. Like I said, you kind of just completely ignore what the opponent's doing sometimes, and just keep chucking damage face every single turn, which is very funny. And you just end up stabilizing at like 30 health because you gained stupid amounts of armor. But yeah, it's a weird deck. It's fun. I did queue into a Taunt Warrior in my first game, which wasn't the most enjoyable experience. Usually one taunt is kind of scary enough, but it turned out their deck is entirely literally made of taunts, which made things difficult. But yeah, I've really enjoyed Quest Druid. And it's been, again, this expansion has been so weird, and Aggro Priest and Quest Druid like right there up as the weirdest stuff right now.
And I will say one of the underrated cards in this deck is actually Wicker Claw. When I was in the Martian version, because I'm gonna be honest, I didn't read this card closely because I just saw I got a vague notion of what the card did, and I was like, oh, that's terrible, move on. Then I played it, and it turns out the attack that it gains is permanent, which I had no idea. and that makes some big numbers really quickly. Early on in one of my games, I completed the secure the deck, and then had all of those claws in hand for a Wicker Claw on board, as well as a couple pounces. I stuck a Wicker Claw, got its attack up to 11, got my own attack up to something near that, and would just like bashed an opponent in the face. Seconds after somebody in my chat asked if Wicker Claw was really worth running in the deck, I was clocking somebody for 11 with one.
Yeah, the Aggro Priest and Questline Druid, it's funny, those are the two archetypes I think where the most amount of people had said, hey, have you got a replacement for this? Because the amount of people that are like, yeah, I kind of dusted those secure the decks a while back. Like, I remember I had a couple, but but so it does feel like the epics, whether it's like Shadow Bomber and Secure, are kind of locking a couple people out from this archetype. But maybe don't rush to craft this one, but hey, keep an eye out. If it settles down, maybe it's just gonna be a real archetype. I don't know, a permanent stay in Wild.
If anything, it has the potential, right? Even if it doesn't end up being meta,
yeah.
like it's a deck now, right? So if you want to meme with it, you can.
Yeah.
Last things, Corbett. I know you mentioned this in your Discord, but do you want to make a public statement about Ignite Mage and the state of Ignite Mage?
I hate Ignite Mage. I love Ignite Mage so much, but if I get Curse of Refarmed one more time, my mind is just gonna like explode. I am so done with Curse of Refarm getting through my ice block. I'm the only person playing Mage, I feel like, where with the ladder that I'm at. And for some reason, half these Warlocks are just teching against it. But no, Ignite Mage, like, I really, really, really have liked the archetype. It's super fun. For me, obviously. Like, not for my opponents. Like, but it just feels like it's the same problems as normal for like Flow Mage, right? Like whether it's random tech, random Loathab, random Curse of Refarm, random Eater of Secrets, flares against like Hunters haven't been super fun either. In addition to just like bricking sometimes. Like sometimes you just don't get your Luna. And those are depressing games. But the Chandler version with the Elemental as well, I tried that a bit and I didn't love it either. Like that felt a bit clunky for some reason. Like the draw is pretty inconsistent. Sometimes I felt like in the late game, because you do only draw if you get a fire spell, and so you kind of have to hoard resources sometimes, which makes it a little bit less. I don't know. It feels weird compared to just playing the Luna version, which always draws through your entire deck. Mazaki Mage, I will say, has actually looked quite good in the early days of the expansion. It's the best Mage deck. It's better than Secret Mage right now, which is wild, because it has been the #1 counter to Warlock. Curse of Refarm's notwithstanding. So we'll see if that actually becomes like a common thing, because I have been seeing a ton of it. I'm seeing a lot of the China lists have been running Curse, and that definitely will like completely flip the matchup a lot of time. But we'll see how things go. But yeah, so far for me, Ignite Mage, love it, but I'm not touching it for a week. I can't. I'm done. I refuse. I deleted the deck. Call me out if I play it on stream at any point in the next week. I can't for my own mental health. It's done. It's over.
I can already tell that you're going to be playing this deck tomorrow. So
maybe later today. Yeah.
Yeah, you are. I will second the fact that it's a very fun deck. It's just fun to learn something somewhat new, because there are a lot of different things that you're juggling with the deck that are different than, or at least the version I was playing, different of styles of those Flow Mages, where Mizaki we talked about is probably still just better, but it's fairly linear. This you have to like think about, especially if you get popped at 1, you have to think about, okay, when am I going to draw my last card? You have to pace out those pieces. You have to recognize that Luna's animation is painfully slow, so you have to like really get moving. You have to time your evocation in a way that you don't draw too many, or draw some cards off of it, but not too many, so that you don't burn the quest. Nor do you want to be in a position, which I was in many times as I was fumbling through this, where I play the quest, draw my last card, not thinking about the fact that I just drew the Ignite and now I'm drawing for turn. And so it's like there are a lot of, because the quest goes to the rightmost spot, so there are a lot of things to juggle with this, and because of the animations, you don't have a lot of time to do it. So it's fun, but I can't see it being better than just like something as straightforward as Mizaki. Though I was, pretty consistently able to set up turn 6 into turn 7 with the quest kills against Questline Warlock. So that matchup, once I figured out the pacing of it, really felt manageable.
It feels really good when you're not getting teched against. Like I feel like this random tech feels iffy, but like you're saying, it is kind of interesting, right? Like the managing the hand size, and I think like a big thing that I personally was worried about, and I'm sure maybe you were thinking the same thing, Ruffle, where you kind of get so focused on playing it like perfectly, like you're trying to like get the most out of Luna, like do the right thing every turn. An important thing with this deck is to just rip it and realize it doesn't matter. Like you don't need to get a full hand of evocations. You just need like 3 spells off the evo, and you're gonna be able to complete the quest. And so it's like,
especially with the copies of the Ignite completing the quest for you as well.
Yeah.
So like if you're like, you might not have enough time to rip through a lot of ignites on the first combo turn, but
you need to.
You don't. Yeah, exactly. You can play them early, and then therefore often to maybe not get in an awkward situation with evocation. So there's a definite learning curve in terms of managing the resources. I mean, the early turns are pretty straightforward. It's the combo turn itself. Does take some repetitions. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so complicated, and
because it's 2 straight turns of pressure, because you're often very. There were a lot of times where I either played the quest at the last second or wasn't able to play the quest because the animation was taking so painfully long. And then even on the times where I did get it, it's like, okay, well now I have to rapid fire ignite, or like, I'm going to get the second burst of rope. So it's stressful, but I mean, those are the things that I like. That's why I liked APM Priest as well. Like I just like different ways to interact with the game of Hearthstone sometimes.
A little bit of a side rant, and this is not because I have Boomer APM. I know you guys are like super excited about this, but I always despise decks like APMH, like APM Priest, that like they bank so heavily on like a person's ability to make all the actions in a turn. Like, and it's not something that I think card games, specifically Hearthstone, should ever be balanced around, or like it shouldn't be a competitive deck. And so again, this is not because of my Boomer APM. It's just like, there are people out there that play card games that like they play card games instead of something like a MOBA or a shooter, because they don't have the ability to do all of that. And I feel bad when that's like a competitive deck, And it's,
I don't. So I think that like where they've always been though in terms of their competitive viability is that like they're not good enough to like push people towards playing them, I don't think. So
I mean, well, they have been in the past, right? Like that's how it was with Steeler Warlock. People were like going into game files and disabling animations to gain competitive edges, right? Yeah. And I don't think that that's something that should ever be made into like, if a deck is anywhere remotely competitive, that requires those animations or requires you to go in and like exploit and hack. I think they should just nerf it to the ground, because it's not something that should exist. This is just a little bit of a side rant, nothing to do with play patterns.
There's also like there's not only competitive issues, but like accessibility issues, and then like there's the kind of gray area issues in terms of, are you breaking the TOS by animation clipping or whatever the case may be. So there's it just creates too many headaches. I agree. I personally enjoy it, but I recognize that. Yeah, it's maybe not healthy for the game. I don't know. I still remember practicing on the APM Priest bot. Yeah, the APM Priest simulator for hours before daring to queue that deck up for Wild. So I actually solitaired APM Priest for a while, just so that I could get the motions down. And to your point, Meowth, it's kind of silly that that's a part of a card game, that I would have to do something outside of a card game to prepare me to play the cards. So I can appreciate that, but that doesn't, selfishly, I enjoy it, even if I recognize that it's kind of silly.
I enjoy playing the deck, right? But that doesn't mean that I don't think that a tier, like a meta deck, should not ever have to rely on that, right? Like that's why they rotated Nas for this whole like accessibility thing.
Right.
And so
no, it's a good point.
And this is not me just ranting because of Sorcerer's Apprentice and all that kind of stuff. Like, I just generally don't think that, like, Snip Snap Warlock had the same thing, right, back in the day, for the mirrors. So just something that I hope that the devs keep in mind, right, moving forward. I know, because I bring this up because Ixar on his Q&A mentioned that, like, they don't always communicate with the animation team about like they don't know that the cards that are going to be competitive, right, and like synergize with each other, they don't know, and so they make these really cool animations for these cards, and that's why they take forever, right, which causes competitive issues. But I think my whole opinion is like they should never form competitive issues to begin with, in my opinion. But
yeah, like I've had some frustration with the deck this time because I love these types of archetypes to play, but I've been having some computer issues. It's not that bad, but it means that like I can't play on the highest animation speed, and so that's made it more of a struggle, which sucks. I think there's a really nice sweet spot where like ideally you're playing for a deck that for people that like this type of archetype, there's a sweet spot between playing a lot of cards and that being the only focus. You know, like there's a difference between I think Quest Mage, which was like sort of APM intensive, or Dark Lair Warlock, which is often, you know, you're playing a lot of stuff, making a lot of decisions, compared to something that's all about making as many decisions. And that's kind of where the split is, you know, between Snip Snap making 30 snips versus that being the sole focus versus, you know, Quest Mage playing 10 spells where you're actually thinking a little bit between each time. You're allowed to actually breathe for a moment, whereas for a lot of the time you're just not allowed to breathe with this archetype.
I mean, especially when you're doing repetitive actions too. I mean, that's what APM Priest was. That's what Snip Snap was, and that's what, to an extent, Ignite Mage is. And you know, when you're performing repetitive actions, there isn't really much thought in that. And a card game is meant to be, you know, more strategic, cerebral, and it shouldn't be about being able to complete physical actions, I guess. No, I agree with that.
All right, side rant's over. Let's bring it back to United and Stormwind. Sorry I took us down that road, but that kind of just is our recap of all the big new decks for the first 5 days of the expansion. Right? We don't know how the meta is going to continue to develop. Whether it's going to become even more questline centric, whether Aggro Priest becomes the new big bad that everybody texts for. Who knows? Right? But I guess open question to you guys: are there any cards or decks that you think have a lot of potential right now? That like maybe given a questline nerf or maybe a little bit more refinement, that there's a lot of potential for. Like my big one is Battlegrounds Battlemaster, whatever the 5/5 Wind Fury card is. That card, I felt like it was going to be super win more, but it's like it's nuts in Dark Lair, it's nuts in Hand Buff. It seemed pretty good in Odd Paladin, which is kind of crazy. As well, I was playing Questline Druid and I got bursted from like 35 because of Convictions in Battlemaster, which was kind of disgusting. So like I think there's a couple cards out there. Are there anything for you guys?
I think Battlemaster is good one to raise simply because that's making people realize how strong Conviction is in Standard. So let's hope that card is strong, because that might make for a Conviction nerf down the line. For me, I think that it's not from the expansion, but like Meowth, you mentioned this. Nerebar Weblord is maybe one of the best cards available right now. I will say that having played, I know this is a list that we're gonna have to credit Otters for again, but Tax's Demon Hunter. I shamelessly snagged this from Meowth and Otters after seeing how much fun it is. The quest is not as useless as I made it out to be, and so I think we maybe slept on the intermediate steps and the cost reduction you get from that. I don't know that the deck is, legit or good for anything other than trolling quest warlocks, but it certainly is really good at that and really fun when you're doing that. But I think in terms of cards to watch, I'm not sure. I've been seeing some elemental shamans pop up, and that may be once again, or the questline shamans, that may be once again a response to some of the faster comboing warlock decks. So could be related there. I actually hit legend with elemental shaman and was surprised at how weak it felt. The 4 mana cost reducer didn't seem to do quite as much as I was hoping, and it just, again, it felt too fair. Florgold Toxin doesn't do a whole lot when the opponent's spike in damage after their Tamsin. So
Yeah, the one archetype we haven't talked about, which I have really liked and think is very promising, is Quest Shaman. Another quest deck, of course. I think Questline Burn Shaman is actually very, very solid. Had a lot of fun playing that. So I don't know if that's a deck that necessarily benefits a lot from the potential Warlock nerfs, because it's not perfect into Warlock, but it does fine. But it might be a little bit worse into stuff that Warlock might be pushing out right now. I don't know, but I think like right now the Overload Quest Shaman is really solid with Spirit of the Frog, and all that kind of stuff. So Overdraft going face for like 10 feels nice. feels very satisfying.
I saw a clip from Dane's stream earlier today where he somehow, some way, overdrafted somebody for 43.
Yeah, I saw that. It hurt my head, and I didn't want to like explore that. I was just like, neat, and this
Yeah, he
went on
overdrafted
with my
somebody
day.
for 43. I don't understand,
Yeah.
but
I'm glad I wasn't the only one lost as to how that happened, because like I was trying to run the numbers in my head and I ran out of fingers and toes, so I didn't know where to go with it.
And I guess I'm assuming it was something to do with like Diligent Note Taker and Lightning Bloom. So that way you just like keep getting blooms that overload for 4 and you keep getting mana, and maybe stuff happens like that. You keep drawing with Ancestral Knowledge. But that would just be a guess. I don't know. It's Dane, dude. There could be any number of possibilities. But yeah, that deck's really, really solid as well. And is so how many quest lines are we up to that like we feel good about?
Demon Hunter I don't feel good about, but that deck
No,
was
but, like,
hilarious as hell. All right.
Okay, but it was still the quest line was
it
useful.
was. It was a lot more useful
and-
than I was originally giving it credit for. So
Yeah.
But if we're talking about like competitive, we've got Druid, Hunter, not Mage,
Not
not
Mage.
Paladin, not Priest,
No.
not Rogue.
No.
So Shaman, Warlock, Warrior. So 5 out of 10.
Pretty good. For like, it's pretty good
Yep.
and unexpected, I think, for Wild. So
Yeah.
And I don't think that there's been a lot of experimentation with the Paladin quest. I imagine it might be a little bit too slow rolling just by nature of like actually having to pay mana for the cards to
ew,
make
mana.
progress.
Yuck.
Yeah, I can you imagine? Ugh. So I think that's maybe a little bit slow developing, but maybe again when things become a little bit more based in reality, there's some hope there.
I mean, speaking of reality, I mean, you mentioned how Elemental Shaman felt a little bit like fair. Forgeborn is not a fair card. Forgeborn is kind of nutty. I play a little bit of Elemental Shaman. Like, when you have turns with Bolner and Fireplume Harbinger and Granite Forgeborn and you discount your entire deck by, like, 4 or 5, it's kind of disgusting. I took some tech from Corbett. Elementary Reaction is kind of nutty in that deck once you're discounting your
I like
entire
that.
your entire deck. Just don't hit Ice Fishing, because then that's useless. Don't do that. But that has felt pretty good. I think what you're feeling is the whole, like, it sucks into Quest Warlock. And so it's probably not good enough to play right
it's
now.
the meta. The meta is so fast right now, and that is a card that benefits from like higher cost cards, right? Like
Right.
you want to be able to play 7 drops, 8 drops, Ragnar or Tiamat, and it just, we're in a weird spot right now in just terms of how aggressive and fast this format is.
Yeah, maybe, and it might have just been the. I mean, it was a good enough deck to get me to Legend, but so it might have just been a combination of the matchups that I was hitting and the nature of how I built it. So maybe I just.
I don't think the deck.
going-
I don't think the deck is that good right now. Like again, just because of what it is, but
Right.
I think the card can be very, very strong down the road. But yeah.
All right. That's going to wrap up our week 1 discussion about United and Stormwind and what a week it's been. And we'll see if next week gives us any indication of, this trend shifting, or if we're in for Quest Warlock, meta for a little bit here. We'll see. But yeah, I hope you guys have been at least enjoying the expansion. I know I haven't been enjoying the Quest Warlocks, but there have been a ton of really, really fun cards and really powerful cards, which have been really, really nice to mess around with. I've been having a lot of fun, even with all the Quest Warlocks. So that's always a sign of a great expansion to me, and I hope you guys are, those of you guys listening, and then obviously Corbett and Rolf, I hope you guys have been having fun too. I'm assuming so.
Yeah, I've been enjoying it too. It wasn't entirely what I expected for a lot of the decks that I am not only finding success with, but having fun with. But yeah, I have been, again, outside of I think the prevalence of Dark Glare Warlocks of all sorts. I think that it's been a lot of fun for the first few days at least.
Yeah, it feels weird. I feel like I've actually enjoyed myself despite the Warlock. Like, I feel like I'm supposed to be mad, right? Like I've played against 57 Warlocks in 100 games. Like I'm meant to be pissed off, but I honestly haven't been. Like I've kind of just enjoyed the weirdness and experiment. Like I've been playing a lot of like Druid and weird stuff, and it's been fun. And we'll see if it lasts. Like I'm enjoying this more than the similar position where it was like Steel or Warlock. I didn't like that meta nearly as much. Like I thought that was pretty horrible for the first week or so. Whereas this time, I don't know. I'm weirdly kind of enjoying myself. We'll see. We'll see. We'll check back in a week. We'll, tentatively for now.
I mean, we always ask for change, right, in the format, and this expansion has brought about change in the WoW format, which I guess is maybe all we can ask for. It feels like okay change, right? Everything that's not Darkglare. So
I mean, it's gonna be brutal in a week. Like, let's be honest. If this continues, it's gonna be horrible. But we'll see.
All right. Until next week, where we'll recap and talk about all of this. We hope you guys have a good one. Rolf and Corbett, thank you again for joining me. Let the people know where they can find you streaming all of this new content for the new expansion.
You can find me at Raffle on Twitch and YouTube, as well as at RaffleHS on Twitter and Instagram.
And of course, you can find me at Corbett Games on all those platforms. So that's Corbett Games on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube.
Yep. And you can find me at GetMeOut on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube as well. Again, we hope you guys are enjoying the new expansion, even with all the Darkglares. Hope you guys are finding some solace and some fun decks. And we'll check back in next week to see how it all progresses. Have a good one, everybody.